To the world, they were just my uncle and auntie. To me, they were the only home I had left. But when I trusted them like blood, they sold my pain for their greed. But then, I became the curse they invited into their own house. To the world, they were just my uncle and auntie. To me, they were the only home I had left. I was 15 when the accident happened. One rainy evening, while I was doing homework and waiting for mom and dad to come home, the police knocked on our door. Two officers. Soaked uniforms. Grave expressions. And just like that, my world ended. A drunk driver had crashed head-on into my parents' car. There were no survivors. I don't remember much after that. Just sounds, sirens, crying, the echo of my scream as the words settled in. My relatives came to the funeral like shadows. Hushed condolences, forced hugs, and then they all left, one by one. All except for two, my father's younger brother, Arvind uncle, and his wife Meena auntie. They said, "You'll stay with us now, beta. You're our blood." And in my broken state, I believed them. I wanted to believe them. They lived in a modest 2-story house in a quieter part of town. I moved into their guest room, the same room my dad used to sleep in when he visited them during college. At first, I was numb, empty, just floating. But Auntie was kind. She made my favorite dishes, tucked me in at night like mom used to. Uncle took care of the legal stuff, school transfers, court formalities, and my parents' bank accounts. I heard him say to someone over the phone once, "We'll take good care of her. She's family." Those words stayed with me, like a promise carved into my heart. School felt like a blur. Kids whispered about me in the hallways, that girl whose parents died. But I didn't care. I had a roof over my head, food on my plate, and two adults who seemed to care. At least, that's what I told myself. But slowly, the cracks began to show. It started with the money. One night, I walked into the living room and overheard them whispering. "She's worth more than we thought," Auntie said, her voice low and calculating. "She'll be 18 in a few years. Till then, we control everything." I froze. Worth more. Control everything? That night, I remembered something. The day after my parents' funeral, Uncle had taken me to the lawyer's office. I'd been 2 days to understand what was happening. I now realized he'd become my legal guardian, and along with that came full access to the inheritance my parents had left behind. Millions, tucked away in fixed deposits, insurance payouts, and property. But I didn't confront them. Not yet. I thought, maybe I misunderstood. Maybe they were just talking about expenses. But the warmth I'd once felt from them began to fade. The homemade meals stopped. The bedtime hugs disappeared. Slowly, I became just a tenant in their house. A burden they tolerated. Because I came with money. They started locking the door to the study. I once saw Uncle angrily snatch mail addressed to me. Auntie began reminding me, ever so subtly, that I should be grateful. That they took me in when no one else did. And I swallowed it. Every word. Because I had nowhere else to go. Until one day, something happened that shattered the illusion completely. It was a Monday evening when Auntie called me downstairs. "Where's something nice?" she said. "We have guests." When I came down in my modest curdy, Auntie frowned. "No, no. Put on that blue dress. The tight one." Something in her tone felt off. But I did what she asked. In the living room sat a man. Much older than me. In his 40s maybe. Slicked hair, gold chain, eyes that scanned me like merchandise. Uncle greeted him like a friend. "This is Priya," he said proudly. "She's smart, respectful, untouched." The man smirked. "She'll do." "She'll do?" My stomach turned. After dinner, Auntie took me aside. "He's a good match, beta. Rich. He likes you. If this works out, we'll all benefit." I finally asked, my voice barely a whisper, "Are you trying to marry me off?" She didn't blink. "It's for your future. You'll thank us later." But the look in her eyes wasn't love. It wasn't concern. It was greed. Cold, ugly, shameless greed. I was just a commodity to them now. Something to be sold off. And the worst part? They had every legal right over me. They controlled my guardianship, my money, my future. And I knew then, they never saw me as family. They saw me as a gold mine they could quietly drain. That night, I locked my door, sat on the bed, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't break. I plotted. They thought they had trapped me, that I was just a scared little orphan clinging to the only home I had left. But they forgot one thing. I wasn't just my parents' daughter. I was their legacy. And I would make sure their betrayal didn't go unpunished. I stopped being a child the night they tried to sell me off. Something inside me shifted. I looked at the same walls, the same faces, the same voices, and they felt foreign. The house no longer felt like a shelter. It felt like a well-disguised trap. From that night on, I watched everything. Silently. Carefully. I pretended. I smiled at Auntie's fake sweetness. I nodded when Uncle talked about my best interests. But inside, I was unraveling the truth, one thread at a time. First, I began checking the study when they weren't home. I'd memorized where they kept the keys from watching them, top shelf of Auntie's wardrobe, behind an old handbag. I waited for a day, they went out for a wedding. Said I was feeling sick and stayed back. As soon as the car left the gate, I moved fast. The study was like a vault of secrets. Documents. Legal papers. Copies of my parents' will. Bank statements. One line chilled my blood. All financial access lies with the legal guardians till Priya turns 18. Everything they did was legal. Every drop of my inheritance, dripping into their hands. They even had receipts of large withdrawals. Expensive purchases. Things I never saw. One receipt stood out. A deposit slip of 5 rupees locks made in someone else's name. When I cross-checked the name later, it belonged to the man they tried to marry me off to. That's when it became crystal clear. They were selling me. And not just for marriage. For profit. I took photos of every document. Every transaction. Every signature. I backed them up in cloud storage and emailed them to a new address I created secretly at school. But still, I needed more. I needed proof that wasn't just paper. So I started recording them. A cheap little pen camera bought through cash at a shop far from home. Hidden right inside my pencil holder. Another one slipped under the sofa where they usually spoke at night. And slowly, the audio files began to build up. You think she suspects anything? No, she's too naive. Like her mother. She's worth every penny we spent. When she turns 18, she'll sign what we want. She's not our daughter. Just a deal we got lucky with. Each line hit like a blade. Each word lit a fire in me. But I didn't cry anymore. I stored every clip, every whisper, every plan. I stitched their greed into a net so tight, even their lies would choke on it. And as I smiled at them every morning, pretending to be their sweet, obedient niece, they had no idea I was already digging their grave with their own words. There's something dangerous about being underestimated. Uncle and Auntie thought I was just a quiet, grieving girl. Someone easy to manage, easy to silence, easy to sell. And I let them think that. But while they plotted with smiles, I built weapons with silence. Still, I needed help. Someone who wasn't tied to them. Someone who could guide me without drawing suspicion. That's when I remembered Ravi sir, my school counselor. He'd once told me, after my parents' death, if you ever feel unsafe, even for a second, you come to me. No questions asked. Back then, I thought I'd never need him. But now, I was drowning in secrets. So one afternoon, I faked a stomach ache and stayed back after school. When the hallways emptied, I went to his office. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. I need to talk to you. And I need you to promise me. Whatever I say, You won't tell my uncle and auntie. He paused. Are they hurting you? I looked him dead in the eye. Not the way you think. But yes. That day, I told him everything. I showed him the recordings, the receipts, the emails I'd backed up. And as he listened, his expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to pure horror. They're trying to traffic you, he said quietly. This is serious, Priya. Very serious. I know, I whispered. That's why I came to you. He promised to help me. Carefully, without raising alarms. We couldn't go to the police just yet. Uncle had too many connections, especially at the local level. But Ravi sir had a friend, a journalist, who specialized in exposing human trafficking and financial fraud. Someone who knew how to shine a light before the predators could run. Within 2 weeks, I met her, Nikita Day. She was sharp, brutal with the truth, and had a look in her eyes that said she'd seen evil and made it bleed. We created a plan. I'd keep collecting evidence. But more importantly, I'd let the situation play out just long enough to expose everything, on record, in detail. I'd pretend to go along with my uncle's wedding plans, get every meeting, every deal, every dirty conversation on tape. Nikita would handle the rest: media, legal action, and public exposure. But before that, we had to test how far they were willing to go. So, I played the part. The obedient girl. The grateful orphan. The perfect puppet. And one evening, Uncle called me into the living room, grinning wide. He's coming to finalize everything next week, he said. The dowry's settled. He'll take good care of you. Auntie added. Your parents would have been so proud. I smiled. That moment, right there, was the one they'd remember when everything crashed down. Because while they planned to sell me into silence, I was about to turn their greed into a spotlight they could never escape. The day of the meeting arrived like poison wrapped in flowers. My so-called groom came with his family, fake smiles, sharp eyes, greedy hearts. Uncle had cleaned the living room like it was a temple. Andy draped me in my mother's old surrey. The irony wasn't lost on me. She would have wanted this, Auntie said, adjusting my earrings. No, she wouldn't have. She would have bought them. Screamed. Burned this house down before handing me over like property. But I didn't flinch. Because this wasn't just a meeting, it was a performance. And I had a camera hidden in the bangles around my wrist. I walked into the room, head bowed, voice soft. Just the way they wanted. The man, Raghav, was older than I remembered. Early 30s, maybe. The same man who once looked at me like a transaction. Now he smiled like he owned me already. She's perfect, he said to my uncle while sipping tea. Just as we discussed. Every word was a nail in their coffin. I sat there quietly, listening as they discussed the money, the wedding date, and my heart froze, the documents I would need to sign before the wedding. She'll transfer the property before marriage, yes? Raghav's father asked. Uncle nodded. Already planned. Just a few signatures. It's all in the name of trust. That was their game. Use marriage as bait, take everything, and walk away with clean hands. I kept nodding, smiling when they asked me if I was happy. I said yes. Over and over. But inside me, a fire raged hotter than I'd ever known. Later that night, I uploaded the full recording to Nikita. The next morning, her message lit up my screen. We're ready. The story drops in 3 days. Brace yourself. 3 days. That's all I had to stay in this house of snakes. So I kept pretending. Uncle started showing me documents to practice my signature. Auntie kept feeding me lines about how lucky I was. I laughed when they laughed. I thanked them. I even called them Ma and Papa once. That part almost made me vomit. But I had to be convincing. Meanwhile, Nikita and Ravi sir worked behind the scenes. The journalist had everything. The paper trail, the audio clips, the recordings from the wedding talks. Even old neighbors who remembered strange men visiting my uncle's house late at night, back when I was too young to understand. And then, finally, the night before the expose, Uncle came into my room with a file. "These are your parents' property papers," he said gently. "Just sign here. We'll take care of everything." I looked him dead in the eyes. "You always do." I signed the fake signature I'd practiced. He smiled, patted my head, and left. He didn't know that while he was sealing his victory, I had already signed his destruction. The morning it happened felt strangely quiet. Birds still chirped. Tea still boiled in the kitchen. Auntie still hummed some old devotional song like every day. But the air, it held something sharp, something waiting to erupt. I sat at the breakfast table with my books, pretending to study. Uncle scrolled through his phone, sipping his tea. "You've made us proud, Priya," he said with a smile that now felt plastic. "We gave you a new life, and now you're giving back." I nodded. "Of course. I owe you everything." The irony dripped from every word, but they didn't notice. They were too high on victory, too blind to see the cliff ahead. Then it began. At first, just a ping on Uncle's phone. Then another, and another. Confused, he checked, and froze. On his screen was a news headline that would change our lives forever. Exclusive, respected couple exposed in shocking orphan trafficking and inheritance scam, full audio and documents released. I looked up from my books slowly, like I was curious. Auntie came rushing out of the kitchen as Uncle's hands began to tremble. "What happened?" she asked, wiping her hands. He didn't answer. Then her phone buzzed too. And then the landline rang. And within minutes, the world crashed through the front door. Reporters, police officers, social workers, all pouring in like a flood that had been waiting just behind the dam of silence. "Mr. Rajendra Sharma?" one officer asked. Uncle tried to speak, but no sound came. "You're under investigation for fraud, trafficking conspiracy, and financial exploitation of a minor." Auntie screamed. "What is this nonsense? This is our daughter. We raised her." One of the female officers turned to her, voice calm but ice cold. "She's not your daughter. She was your target." I stood up, silent, calm. Uncle's eyes found mine. And for the first time in my life, I saw fear in them. "Priya, Beta, tell them. Tell them we loved you. That we did everything for you." I tilted my head and whispered, "Then why did you sell me?" His lips parted, but no words came. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. And through it all, I stood tall. Because for the first time, the truth wasn't trapped in my throat. It was out there, bleeding through headlines, through audio clips, through documents that couldn't be buried anymore. Ravi sir stood at the gate, watching protectively. And Nikita. She walked up to me, placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, and said, "You did it." But I wasn't done. Because the law might take its course. The media might feast on their downfall. But what I had planned for them was far from over. They wanted to take everything from me. Now, I would take something they could never buy back. Uncle and Auntie thought their biggest fear was public shame. They were wrong. Shame fades. Headlines disappear. But isolation, powerlessness, the slow decay of reputation and relevance, that's forever. They were taken into custody for questioning. No formal charges yet, but the world already judged them. Their phone numbers were leaked. Their pictures went viral. People spat when they saw them on the street. The same neighbors who once smiled at Auntie now whispered, pointed, and locked their gates when she walked by. But I wasn't satisfied. Because jail was too easy. They needed to feel what I felt. So, I started with the foundation they stood on: money. Through Nikita's help, we contacted lawyers who specialized in inheritance abuse. With Ravi sir as witness and every piece of forged paperwork in hand, we filed a case to revoke their control over my parents' property. And it worked. Within weeks, the court froze all their accounts. Property titles were flagged. Uncle's precious power began to crumble. One morning, I visited the lawyer's office for final signatures. And as I walked out, I saw them, standing across the street. Uncle in a wrinkled shirt, Aunty looking like she hadn't slept in days. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Because in that moment, they knew I'd taken back what was mine. But my revenge wasn't just about land or money. It was about the lie they lived in. So, I exposed more. I dug through old ledgers. Found out how many other girls had visited our home, adopted for a while, then quietly sent away. Nikita published a second story, Missing Girls, Silent Streets, the hidden network beneath a normal family. That headline destroyed any last thread of sympathy they had. Schools removed their names from donation boards. Old friends stopped visiting. Their family disowned them publicly. And then came the final cut. I sent them a letter. Just one line, handwritten, in the same ink they once used to forge my parents' will. You built your life on my silence. Now let my voice be your prison. They moved away after that. To some small town where no one knew them. Or so they thought. Because the internet never forgets. And neither do the broken. But me? I stayed. I rebuilt the house my parents left behind, not just with bricks, but with dignity. I started a foundation for orphan girls, named after my mother. Every time I stood on that stage to speak, I imagined Aunty watching from a dark room, knowing that the girls she tried to erase had become a name she couldn't escape. They taught me pain, but I gave them something colder, irrelevance. Because in their world, reputation was everything. And I had turned theirs into dust. Just when I thought I had uncovered it all, life handed me one final piece of the puzzle. It came in the form of a letter, old, yellowing, hidden behind a false panel in the attic I once called my prison. I'd gone up there to clean, to throw away the last shadows of that house. But fate had other plans. The letter was addressed to me, and it was written in my mother's handwriting. Tears welled up before I even read the first line. Her words. They were soft, trembling, full of fear, but overflowing with love. My dearest Priya, if you're reading this, it means they never told you the truth. I tried to protect you. I tried to trust my brother. But I fear he is not the man he once was. My hands shook. After your father died, things changed. I was going to leave with you. I had everything ready, documents, passports, money. But that night, something happened. I never made it out. I froze. She had planned to escape and never told me? If they ever tell you I died in an accident, don't believe them. I didn't fall down those stairs. I was pushed. And if something happens to me, know that it wasn't fate. It was betrayal. I dropped the letter. The room spun. My ears rang. My heart raced so loud I thought it would explode. All this time, I had thought they were greedy, manipulative, monsters who exploited me. But now, I realized they were murderers. They had killed my mother, and they had gotten away with it. Until now. I rushed to Ravi sir and Nikita, and within hours, the letter was examined, preserved, and authenticated. It matched her handwriting on file. The ink dated back to that exact year. The story wasn't over. It had just been rewritten. Now, the case escalated. From inheritance fraud to suspicious death and possible homicide. Police reopened the investigation. Neighbors remembered hearing screams that night. No one questioned it back then. Uncle had cried in front of everyone. Aunty had worn white and refused food for days. What a performance. But this time, they wouldn't cry their way out of it. I gave the letter to the police. I gave my mother's voice, her truth, a megaphone. And when the officers came knocking at their new hiding place, when Aunty fell to her knees crying and Uncle screamed about lies and conspiracies, I didn't watch from afar. I stood at the gate, and I said just one thing. You didn't just steal my life. You ended hers. Now, I'm taking both back. They were arrested. Again. But this time, for murder. And as I walked away from the flashing cameras, a strange peace settled over me. Not because justice was done, but because my mother's voice had finally been heard. And I knew. She was watching. The courtroom was quiet. Not because there were no voices, but because the truth had already spoken louder than any scream ever could. Uncle sat slouched on the left bench, his pride shattered, his empire crumbled. Aunty sat beside him, aged by shame and sleepless nights, her hands trembling like she still couldn't believe this was real. The judge read out the charges: financial fraud, inheritance forgery, emotional abuse, and now, suspected murder. There was no drama, no last-minute breakdowns, no screams begging for mercy. They were hollow now, like ghosts of the people they once pretended to be. I watched them in silence, not out of pity, but power. Because once upon a time, I had begged for them to see me, to hear me, to love me. Now the world saw everything. The letters, the evidence, the documents, the voices of other girls they had used and discarded. And my mother's final message, the one they tried so hard to bury. Nothing could save them now. As the gavel hit the desk and the hearing ended, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. Questions flew. But I walked out without saying a word. Because I had said all I needed to. And now, I wanted peace. I moved back into the house my parents built, not the broken one Uncle had stripped down to bricks and bank statements. I rebuilt it, painted it with my mother's favorite colors, hung up photos of my father's smiles, planted jasmine in the garden, just like Mom used to. The house wasn't haunted anymore. It was home again. I started a school for orphan girls. Not just to give them books, but to give them a voice. A place where no uncle or auntie would ever silence them again. The sign outside read, Mira's home for every girl who was told she belonged to no one. Because now, they belong to themselves. One evening, Nikita asked me, "Do you feel better now that they're gone?" I looked at her and said softly, "They aren't gone. They're exactly where they belong." And that's when I realized, revenge doesn't always come with blood or screams. Sometimes, it comes with silence, with the echo of your own footsteps walking away from those who tried to destroy you, with the calm of knowing they will live every day surrounded by the mess they created without anyone left to fool, and with the strength to forgive, not for them, but for you. So you can be free, because in the end, they tried to bury me in pain, but I grew in the dark, and when I rose, I became the storm they could never silence.